Welcome to Faith in Practice, presented by Higher Powered Sports, PT, the podcast where faith meets everyday life and vocational calling. Each episode, your host, Kurt Kessler, and his guest will explore how to live out your faith in your work, relationships, and daily challenges. Let's grow together and discover how to live out your faith with passion and purpose. Let's get started.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Faith in Practice. Today, I am joined by our middle school pastor at the church that I attend, Mannheim BIC. His name is Tim Fray. A little background here. Our wives grew up in the same church. We saw each other at the Stormers game a few weekends ago. I get to see him preach on Sundays every once in a while, but the other week, Pastor Bryce invited you on stage to share a message, and I thought it was so incredibly important for people to hear. So I got home and I got on Instagram right away and to connect with you to come on and talk about it. So before I get to that, I'm going to let you introduce yourself a little bit and give some background on your faith journey and how it landed you in your current role. So Tim, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, Kurt, thanks for having me. As Kurt said, my name is Tim Fray. I'm the middle school pastor at Mannheim BIC, and I'm actually in my 12th year of youth ministry, which is kind of crazy to think about. But I think my faith journey, I grew up in a Christian home. Like, my parents taught Sunday school and kind of had like the pretty standard experience until middle school, when there was just kind of some hard things that happened at home and in my family. And a church just kind of became like a safe haven or like a safe space to be at in that. So I, went to church camp for the first time as a middle schooler, started going to a lot of the weekly gatherings and things like that. And I just really, for me, was like the first place that I was truly a part of, where I feel like I truly belonged. And in high school, found out like, hey, you could do this for a job and you can go to school for it. And I felt called into that in high school, and I started at my first church my freshman year of college when I was like 18. And I've just kind of been in this world since then. And I've learned a lot and grown and been in different environments and different experiences. But it's been fun to be able to serve students and families in that way.
It's funny because I'm getting to learn about you with everybody else who listens to this, but it's just so interesting how you had some challenges that you faced when you were in middle school in that time of your life, and then God ends up using that to kind of shape your passion for it in high school, and then allows you to continue to help this age group of kids coming up. So even just right off the bat, easy connection. So cool to see how God used your own experiences to shape that passion. What are some of the things that you're seeing with kids this age? What kind of challenges are they facing, or what kind of things are you helping them overcome?
Yeah, so I think with this age group specifically, there's kind of been where they're at culturally and developmentally is kind of shifted. So research would show us that in the last 10 years, what used to face a senior in high school is now facing an eighth grader, or what used to face a ninth grader is now facing a fifth grader. So kind of issues and maturity of those issues that they're facing has all been pushed up to a point where they're maybe not developmentally in a place to even know what to do with that. So I think that shows itself up in a number of different ways, but I think in a broad sense, students are facing issues that maybe they're intellectually, maturity, whatever wise, not sure what to do with. And then now they're in the midst of a digital age where there's not a lot of commonality between students. So what I mean by that, 10 to 15 years ago, most kids listen to the same music. You listen to the radio. Now with Spotify, kids can listen to all kinds of obscure, random, different things. They're on Instagram and on their reels. People are talking about God, but that could be a church of 30 people with some pretty obscure thoughts, or it can be really hard for them to know where truth is at in the midst of all these different pieces. So I think all of these challenges that they're facing and what they're carrying, coupled with the fact that it's harder than ever for them to be in community, I think has created a number of challenges for students. But I think those are kind of some of the larger, in my opinion, larger issues at play.
Yeah, and I see the same thing in the sports world. it used to be 10, 15 years ago, it was, you kind of play for your high school and, you kind of did some club stuff or off-season stuff, but now it's just like year-round, multiple teams, multiple club teams, and a lot of it is in the name of, one, competing because you want your child to have the same opportunity to compete as everybody else, but then also wanting to get exposure for potential colleges or whatever it may be. And all those pressures are now starting on those kids in, even elementary school to some degree. They're having club teams and club seasons. It's not quite as intense at those levels, but again, middle school is when that really starts to come out. You start to see these trends develop, and then even in the sports world, like you start to see these injuries happen that you're used to not having to deal with until you're in your 20s or mid 20s or whatever it may be. So even that in my job, I tend to see a lot of that. What's difficult on my end is trying to keep up with the times and give them relevant messages. Because if I just tell them like, well, I quit your club team, that's not going to go over so well. So with what you're doing and your role in these kids' lives, like what kinds of challenges are they facing as a result of this kind of cultural shift? And I guess how do you see that manifest in their lives?
Yeah. So, I mean, studies would show like depression, anxiety rates, depending on age demographics, have doubled, tripled, and in some cases quadrupled in the last 5 to 10 years. And so I think obviously you can see it in mental health of what students are navigating. And I think some of it, to your point, is beyond just what they're facing, the pressure on them at a younger age. Just to echo what you said, like middle school and high school students that specifically me working with middle school, they have more packed schedules than adults. I mean, there's times where they're getting up for practice at 5, 6 a.m. They come to youth group right off of another practice and they're starting homework at 10 p.m. And so I think knowing where you have value in the midst of all that in an already tough age, I think can lead to some challenges. And also just when they don't feel like they have community or space to talk about it, where do you go with that except to like ruminating on it and to being anxious about it or to achievement? Like I'm going to go nail this sport, which is great and not an issue, or go all in on this activity, but internally knowing their value outside of that. So when the stakes are that high in middle school that you better not just make the team, but have the role that this is going to be your position long term. If you don't get that role or you don't make that team, that's where a lot of those really hard conversations come into play as well. So I think that's one way you see it in mental health. The number of referrals that we're doing for students and trying to get them connected to good Christian counselors and things like that has definitely increased in the last 5 to 10 years. Even like I'm seeing more cases of like social anxiety, which, we have a little bit of a larger youth group, but just students who struggle to know how to interact with pieces of that is definitely, I think, shows up in that way. And honestly, for me, week in and week out, I see it show up in inability to focus. So we'll be in the main session and kids, we used to joke and we've tried to get better at this, but like there'd be a parade to the bathroom when the message starts, right? Or during worship after the game, there's like a number of students who want to get a drink of water. And I think for a long time, I thought that was like disrespect towards me. Like, oh, well, they don't care about God. They're apathetic or things. But I think honestly that maybe they don't know how to sit in silence or to sit in some of the hard things that we're talking about, because life is just at this frantic pace that you could go an entire day with an AirPod in, a class in front of you, a coach or a teacher in front of you, and having never had a moment where it was just you and silence and God. And then when you take them to that moment, it makes sense that they want to talk to their friend. It makes sense that they want to go get water because they don't know what to do with having to sit in all of the questions, concerns, pain that they've kind of been stuffing. So honestly, I think sometimes that's where it shows up in behavior. Obviously, sometimes middle schoolers are just going to be chaotic. They're having a bad day. They're going to be disrespectful. So all that's going to play into it. But I'm noticing at a deeper level, attentive focus feels awkward at first for students. But when we've actually sat in it, I've seen some really powerful moments of students being able to be honest and actually feel what it feels like to exhale for 10, 20 minutes and kind of reflect on it. So I'd say those are a couple things where I'm seeing it kind of play itself out.
How do you take someone who has never sat with silence or sat with feelings or sat in reflection with God, and how do you introduce that to someone?
Yeah, so I think it's gradually, and I think you need to normalize it. So even this year, like we're looking to make prayer, like to offer leaders to pray for students, like every time we have worship. Because I think before we would do 3 or 4 times in a year, we have this moment, but that's not making it a normal practice. Like us quieting our heart, bringing community in, relying on God, that should be a normal rhythm as a disciple or someone following Jesus. So I think one piece of it is to normalize it. This isn't just when you're on the floor, like can't go on anymore, the hardest thing in your life is happening. Like this is a healthy rhythm that in general is a positive thing. But I think the other side of it is you have to ease them into it. So for a student to know how long they're going to be silent for can be helpful. So this sounds like to get super practical. I might say, hey, for the next minute, I want you to close your eyes for a minute, and I'm going to have you reflect on throughout your day what comes to mind as a hard thing that happened or a good thing that happened. Or you want to really start at a space where almost training wheels, right? Like you kind of build that muscle up. And then where we've seen some really cool moments of it is we did like it's not quite Stations of the Cross, but like there was 4 or 5 different reflective stations in the chapel. And when they have something to reflect on, or they know what they're being instructed to do and how long it's going to last and what to do, they feel safe enough to be able to start to enter in. Because really, it is the muscle of distraction, right? Like it's just all over. But I also think there's a safety element to it. Like students aren't going to be able to sit be at rest until they know they belong and they matter and people care about them and they're seen and they're okay. Like I don't know what background they're coming from, but if I just suddenly say we're going to be silent for 30 minutes here tonight, like it's not going to work and they're not going to, it's almost like I've never been I've never done scuba diving, but like if you get the bends if you go too quickly, right? Like for students, how do we gradually get them aware of each level and let them do that in a safe way? So I think students need to know they're safe, they're cared for, and it needs to be a new muscle we're kind of training them to do.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. And I had a thought, like one thing we see in like athletic training or physical therapy world is the idea of stress capacity. Everybody has their own threshold for stress. And the longer time you spend over that threshold, the more likely injury or pain or something negative is going to impact the body. So one thing I teach people who either have had these chronic pain levels or these high pain levels for a little while is just some simple breathing techniques to calm the nervous system. And in the same way, you're kind of describing that silence as that little bit of a reset to the spiritual nervous system,
Yeah.
which is a pretty cool parallel there. And then you also said about kids who are just constantly stimulated and just not quite knowing what to do, or they're not sure how to deal with some of these pressures that they're facing. And so a couple thoughts, you mentioned like getting into activities and really pouring their all into activities, sports or whatever it may be. And it's come up a couple times on this podcast, the topic of where we're placing our identity. And so if like you're dealing with stuff but not dealing with it in a great way, like you might really push all in towards basketball, and then you put your full identity in basketball, and then you have a good game and you're feeling great. You have a bad game, you're feeling terrible about yourself. And just I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on like, do you see kids come in with this almost I'll call it an identity crisis, or where they've put in their identity in things that aren't as steady as our relationship with God, and then how do you kind of shift them or guide them to a more solid foundation?
Yeah, I mean, to answer your question, absolutely, right? Like I think there's definitely situations and it's common, like middle school would be a huge identity time. So we do like a discipleship pathway, which is, hey, over the 4 years, 5th to 8th grade that they're with us, What do we want them to know? And those are the big questions they're asking. In fifth and sixth grade, they're asking the question of like, do I belong? Do I matter as a friend? Like, who do I want to be my friend? And then seventh and eighth grade research shows like they're asking the questions of like, what impact do I make? Like, what is my purpose? What am I kind of about? So I definitely see students asking those questions. And to be honest, like, I think adults, college, like I think even beyond middle school, we can continue to ask that if we don't have it answered in knowing who Christ is. Honestly, for me, where I see it most evident, or like there's always a youth group after people find out who makes the basketball team, right? And it's fascinating to watch how people walk in after that. And I say that we have kids in track, a number of sports, but there was this year specifically, I remember a couple students walking in, already had the next sport they were going to do. Like, okay, I didn't make this team, but now I'm wrestling or now I'm doing this other sport. And a couple students, like, it felt like they didn't think they just lost out being a part of a team, like they lost their friend group. And like, okay, I was only valuable to this group of friends because I did this sport. So I think in middle school, where that gets amplified is like, it honestly is a roller coaster of friendship, of air quote dating relationships in middle school that happen for a day, a week, a month. And so there's moments where we have the opportunity to go into lunches and be around students and just kind of encourage them during lunch periods, have lunch with them. And like I've seen the amount of times lunch tables change in a school year is wild to watch. Like, well, first I was with this group of friends and now I'm with this group of friends. And so feels like doesn't make the team, doesn't get the part they want in the play, doesn't get to be a part of something. They feel like their value is in their achievement and what they're seen as. So either, okay, I need to make this team and now I belong to a group of people and now I'm a part of it. Or, hey, I need to be the funny one of the friend group. Or I need to be the one who fills this role. And so they're coming from a lot of different situations where that is. And I think middle school is a boiling pot to make all of that rise up and all of that insecurity and identity question. So to me, how we approach it, I think is twofold. One is we look to have our leaders walk with them for 4 years through fifth to eighth grade. And the language I use around that is I want to create a consistent presence in the midst of inconsistent life. So I can't guarantee middle schoolers what life's going to look like. It's going to be up, left, down, right, backwards. But I want them to know that there's a person and there's people that care about them who, like, regardless of what life does, and are not overly impressed by their achievements and also aren't scared off by their shortcomings. Because if that can be modeled by high school student leaders and adults in their life, I don't know what adults in their life have modeled for them. So I want to, through our leaders, create that environment where they know on a Wednesday night, 30 Wednesdays out of a year, what they can get. Like, they know what to expect. They know that people are going to care about them. They know they can bring whatever they're facing. And then I think just theologically, like, it's important how we present the gospel and identity to them. Like, I spend a lot of time in middle school with them understanding, like, the fact that while they were in a state that they could do nothing to change, God sent Jesus. Like, God isn't somehow loving you more because you aced a test versus failing a test. The things that we think seem so like Veggie Tales, right? Like so simplistic. But man, like if we get that in our heart and like when that goes from head to heart and you actually live that out, man, it's so cool to watch kids who know who they are and know how to engage in it. So those are a couple ways. There's obviously like what we do topically, but I honestly think community is the biggest way it's shown. Like I can preach it up front all day long, but until they see an adult or a student outside of small group time, outside of when they have to be on for them, take the time to invest in their life and care about them, that's when it really speaks like we can be kind of Jesus with skin on for them and show what that looks like.
That's so cool. And and you're outlining, I'm kind of following the journey of someone who, you might have a middle schooler who belongs to this friend group. They all go to, they've been playing, we'll use basketball as an example. They've been playing on the same basketball team growing up. They get up to a certain level and it's tryouts, and then someone gets cut. And that's when you start to see them come into the building. And it's I can just start like putting myself in their shoes and imagine that disappointment that they're feeling and just trying to figure out like, okay, how do I belong in my own friend group now? Because things just drastically change very quickly, as things tend to do in middle school. And then you said, okay, maybe they go try another sport, or maybe they find another group to eat lunch with at school, or maybe they turn to substances at a crazy early age or something like that. Like, it's just you paint the picture where it becomes easier and easier to see and explain why some of these things happen in this age group. And to be honest with you, this conversation starts to break my heart for that age group a little bit. I can think back to, my middle school years, and, I was never cut from a team or anything like that. But those years of development in themselves, mind you, we are not facing the same pressures they were or they are now. And it was still some of the toughest times. So I love what you're doing. I love the passion that you have for it, and the work that you're doing to make a difference in this age group where they might experience some brokenness for the first time, and we haven't even talked about like what could be happening at home.
Mhm.
So like there's
Yeah.
just all these factors during these key developmental years, and if they don't have or don't know how to find that foundation, you can see where things can start to go south here. Yeah, just that my heart is breaking as we talk, but in a good way. In a good way. Another question I had for you: Have you been keeping up with any of the Forrest Frank stuff recently?
Yeah. 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 Yep.
So I'm obsessed with this to the point where my wife is like, "Oh my gosh, you need to get off of social media now." But I it's fascinating to me. But after, Forrest Frank, his Lemonade song came out and hit the top of the charts, there was something on the news about Gen Z being one of the most Christian generations in quite some time. And part of me is like, my first reaction is I'm so excited because like it's a revival that most of us have been praying for years, and it's a great sign. But then part of me is like, how do we take this from just like being like a fad or pop culture, or like what's cool in the moment, and like actually create lifelong godly relationships from it? Have you ever thought about that?
Yeah. So, and it's wild. Like even on like college campuses, like there's, you know, hundreds of students like confessing sin and like praying to accept Jesus and like just in ways that is really cool. Honestly, I was thinking about this kind of the other day. What we do in youth ministry is not that different from youth ministry in the 90s, 2000s. Like I don't view that my job is to do something spectacularly incredible every week. So I guess to answer your question, how we navigate that is not going to be by doing something more spectacular. Like I'm not going to be able to create an experience for a student on a Wednesday night that is anything like what they could go to 50 other places and have. So if I'm looking for the most entertainment, if I'm looking to be the funniest, if I'm looking to have the best music, they could go find their preference in any of those things in 5 seconds on their phone. So I obviously want to have fun, and we're going to do things that are going to catch their attention, and we're going to make memories that way. But I think what is capturing the heart of students currently, or of the next generations coming up, is genuine things, because they can smell fake a mile and a half away. Like, you can talk about Forrest Frank. Sometimes he's a little too on the nose with what he's saying, like the God's got my back, but like they can look at it and be like, okay, that's a person that they view as genuine. Like they see that he's trying to figure out what following God looks like. So students are really attracted to what's genuine. They want to be a part of genuine community. They want the people speaking to them and teaching into them to be real. Like that's in the upcoming generations. There's not like an inherent trust based on name value the way there used to be. Like I think in this upcoming generation, it's not so much like, oh, well, that brand has always been good, or that role or that thing. It's more of a like, hey, I need to know someone personally. Like I need a relationship to know that they're genuine and real, and then I'll buy in. So it's a slower process, but once they're in, it leads to deeper fruit in it. And I think the second piece beyond genuine, they want impact. They want their life to be bigger than them because they're more aware of the brokenness in our world than ever before. Like they have more access to hear about pain, brokenness, all those things than we've ever had. And as a nation, we have more, or as people, we now have more access to that. So I think, what does it look like to show them that they can have an impact? They don't just want to come out here on a Wednesday night and hang out. Like, yeah, there's part of it that they want to be around their friends. They could be around their friends anytime. Like they want to come be around their friends and learn about how they can serve and be on mission together. And so I think those are two ways that it's not by being flashy and it's not by being the coolest or the most relevant. They don't care how relevant I am. They care how genuine I am. Then as they know that I'm genuine and I'm real and I care and this isn't transactional and they're not a number, but that there's someone that myself and leaders want to care for, then you can get into being relevant. Then I can be like, this is where God is very relevant to our current day and age. But yeah, those are a couple things that come to mind that I'm noticing in Forrest Frank and just in this generation, like growing and wanting to come back to church. They're wanting to come back to a real, genuine church that wants to make an impact in the brokenness they see.
That's so cool. And as I go through life, well, you said something very interesting. One, just the amount of information they have access to. If you think about when we were growing up, like, I don't know about you, but I was like oblivious to stuff going on in the world and still am to some extent by choice. Got to keep my sanity somehow. But yeah, and in the age of technology and artificial intelligence and whatever, like, I think society has really done a great job of blurring the lines between what's real and what's not. Heck, Mark Zuckerberg trying to create the metaverse, like, and it's just when kids or really people of any age can find something that's real, it's honestly just worth clinging on to, because in this changing world, like, it's like the only thing you can rely on. And then we get to bring people back to the only thing that doesn't change, and that's God's love for us. So really cool. You said you get like 30 kids on Wednesdays?
We'll get between 140 to like 170 between 5th to 8th grade. So
Okay.
We 7th and 8th, we usually get like somewhere around 70 to 90 of both, and then it kind of works itself out that way.
That's awesome, because even like I think about when I was a kid. Now, I didn't grow up in this area, and this area in general is just more spiritually charged, I'll say. And like my church growing up did stuff like that, but it was never something that I was passionate about being a part of. It is just so incredible that you can get 100 plus kids coming out on a Wednesday night to seek something greater. You know what I mean? Like, that is just remarkable to me. And I think it also speaks to the work that you and the staff are doing to promote that environment that they want to keep coming back. Did you do any kind of like outreach, or how do you get people that aren't already involved coming in?
Yeah. So I think there's two things that I think have built it. One is a little unorthodox, but like, one has been that, this church had a heart for our community for 30 years and has just like built trust and relationship of, hey, we're here for Manheim, for Lancaster County, but like we're planted in between 4 schools within a mile. Like, we're going to go care for this area the best we can. And so some of that is like that increased trust helps parents. So another piece of that, our building gets used. I mean, our youth building probably gets used 150 to 200 days out of a year by birthday parties and soccer practices and banquets and all that. So the odds are that if a parent is dropping their kid off for the first time at our youth building, they've already stepped foot in our building for something else. And I think that's huge, because it breaks down a wall of like a trust barrier for parents that are seeking to know that. So some of it is just, I'm standing on the platform of people that have stewarded it well, a relationship with the community, and loved and served it well for multiple decades. And I'm getting to like figure out, what does it look like to continue to do that? The other side of it for us in the last We partnered with an organization called Collision who does like basically their whole heartbeat is they want to empower middle schoolers to share their faith with their friends and high schoolers. Like they want to provide the tools to do that. So we've been really intentional of telling our students like, what does it look like for you to know your testimony in 15 seconds and to know what to do when that conversation comes, when your friends like, why do you go there on a Wednesday night, or what do you do in that? And we're also create then in students having a heartbeat for their friends to come, what are like very easy events to invite them into. So we kind of have 2 events a year that are like an initiate, meaning like for someone who doesn't have a relationship with Christ to initiate that. One would be, it used to be a lock-in, and this year it's going to be like a late night, like we rent out a local rec center and like do things in that. Or like our kickoff this year, we're bringing in like a Christian artist and like a donut truck and like things that like are just an easy, hey, come with me to this events for students. But yeah, to be honest, like I think it's just been trust that has been built over time that we're looking to sustain. And then we're looking to find who are the students in our community that have been overlooked and how do we go reach the students that are still there. But trust with local organizations has been huge, and trust with families. So
Have you dealt with the situation where like maybe a kid is really interested in coming to church or coming to your Wednesday nights, but their parents might not be believers, and so they have to wrestle with like almost like sharing their faith within their own household? Does that make sense?
it does.
Have you seen that?
Yeah, yeah, we have in moments. I think a couple years ago, this wouldn't have been me working specifically, but like we've had high school students like baptized with their parents' approval, like that they're allowing them to take that step, but like not their support, if that makes sense. Like so there can be kind of both ends to that. Honestly, where I see it is, so we'll have students, we had some students go on our mission trip this year or be a part of other events. Like when we want to go away for a weekend for a retreat or go a week away, there's been moments where I've had to build trust with parents who might have past church hurt or might not have an active relationship with God. Like when it's gonna when it goes from being just a thing that their kids go to something that's asking a deeper commitment, there's an opportunity to build trust or to build a wall, is kind of how I look at that. But yeah, there's definitely students who are going home, and we know Wednesday night and maybe Sunday morning is when they're getting a group of people that actually would have a similar faith belief to them. And then they're going into an environment where way more than the hours we get with them, the opposite is being lived out or spoken to them. And yeah, I just tell students their life being changed is going to be the most powerful testimony and gospel their parents are ever going to get. Like when a parent sees a middle school kid, like not just talk about this, but like be about it, like it can change lineages, like it can change generations to come, and it can go backwards. Like, so I think people think about the fact that, people come to church because their kid like really wants to be in the Sunday school, so the parents come. I also think it can be, hey, when a parent sees a kid who Jesus has changed their life and they don't have a reason that makes sense to them besides that, it's going to make them want to know more about what's going on. So I think the fruit of gentleness, patience, kindness, joy, hope, and like a student caring. So that's what I tell them. Like, what does it look like for you to just let God keep changing you, go back into the environment of your home, a different person? It's going to speak to your family.
Super cool. And I would imagine from your perspective, being in the trenches, so to speak, to see those kind of transformations that not only happen in kids, but in families has to be something that's super powerful and super rewarding for what you do.
Absolutely. And I think we would call like kindergarten or nursery up through high school family ministry, because realistically, we're obviously creating an environment to disciple students, but we also want to disciple families to the best we can and give them resources. And when I see a family that, for me, like when you walk through a hard season with the family, but then on the other side of it, you see them still together, still following after God, or for the first time entering into that. Yeah, I mean that's why you do it, right? That's what you're in it to, obviously have fun and be with students, but you're in it for impact and discipleship. And honestly, I just think it's an honor to get to do that. Like that God entrusts to be us and our team to be able to speak into that. Uh, I honestly, it's a statement, right? That's so cliche, but like when we say we get to do this, obviously there's days where it doesn't feel like that. After a lock-in, it's 8 a.m. and you haven't slept in 36 hours and maybe doesn't feel like get to. But most days out of the year, it truly feels like, man, the fact that like this is what I do for a living feels incredible. And the fact that God wants to use us to reach kids to build his kingdom, like that's so cool. So
That's the big part, is having the recognition that, one, God has entrusted you to do it, and two, when you say you get to do it, that to me just speaks like with an open heart of like, all right, God, this is yours. You're in the driver's seat. You're gonna make this happen, and I appreciate that you're making it happen through me. And I've kind of taken, hopefully, a similar mindset into my profession, but I just think that the awareness of allowing God to work through us, and even this past, or not this past Sunday, maybe 2 Sundays ago, when was it Pastor Aaron was saying about like we're so programmed to like, oh, I have to do this for God, instead of just like letting God come and work with you, if that makes sense. So
yeah,
I think just like shaping the perspective for, myself or other people trying to incorporate faith into their work, just, allowing God to be present, allowing God to be next to you and work with you, work through you, is just a really cool thing. And it sounds like that has been the case for you.
when I think like it's learning what your role is, right? So early on, like I thought my role was to fix every situation and every student's problem, and I can't fix myself, right? Like without God, like I need God to fix me and heal me and empower me. So I had a friend who in the community who does work with a nonprofit tell me that their approach is, hey, my job is to point to, not fix. And when I released myself from the pressure of having to fix everything and saying, I get to enter in and point to hope, point to God, point to truth in the midst of it, I think that's what helps you feel like you get to do it, because it feels like I have to do it if it's all on me. But when I can open handedly be like, hey, I can't fix this for you, but I'm in it with you, and God's in it with you. And here's where I even see him right now in the midst of it with you. And here's truth. Let's keep going. That's something that is sustainable and you can do long term. Fixing you can do for a season, and then you'll run out of steam pretty quickly and realize that's not our calling. So I think that's been super helpful for me, just that distinction of what's my role. My role is not the fixer. My role is to point and disciple and come alongside in the midst of it.
And it's funny that you phrase it like that too, because so in my profession, when you're working with human bodies, and I mentioned this on another podcast, but I got stuck in the mindset of like, I need to educate myself more. I need to do this. I need to do that. One, because I want to be the best I could be. I want to maximize the talents that God gave me. But also, like, I thought that having more knowledge was going to give me more control over the outcomes of my patients. But really, like, and like people will come to physical therapy and expect you to fix them. But really, the more I put that burden on myself to fix someone, the less effective I became, because I started to become stressed out with every up and down that they had in their recovery, instead of just like sitting back and saying, okay, God, help me guide them towards their solution. But it's not my job. My business coach phrases it this way. He says, be responsible to your clients, to your patients, but not for them. And I think that saying has, and I've internalized that to, just letting God come in and, God's in control. I'm just here to help guide them to a solution. And sometimes that's really smooth and steady, and sometimes that's like really figuring a lot of stuff out. So yeah, just that really stuck out to me. So since Tim is here with us today, and Tim has this very strong passion, I'm going to let him do our Word Up segment. I shouldn't say let. I'm going to invite him. I'm going to empower him to do our Word Up segment today. So Tim, let's hear what you got.
It's time for Word Up.
So, for our Word Up segment today, I wanted to share Proverbs chapter 3, verse 5 and 6, which says to trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding, but in all your ways acknowledge him, and he will keep your paths straight. And we started talking about this a little bit towards the end of the podcast episode, but I think there's an approach that I've learned and that God's put on my heart called no expectations. And what would it look like to walk around day in and day out open handed and say, instead of, hey God, I expect all these things to happen today. This is what I'm going to do, this task and then this task and then this one. And instead to say, God, what do you want to accomplish today? I'm open handed, whatever you want to use, my gifting, my abilities, my talents, my time, my treasure, whatever that looks like, no expectation. Because what often happens is we find expectations for ourselves. And then as we serve and love and care for people around us, we put expectations onto them. And we say, because I'm expecting this to happen, now you need to now make this happen. And I think it's so much more powerful to just say, hey, God, I have no expectations. I'm ready. I'm gonna walk into it. I'm gonna do the work physically, spiritually, emotionally, mentally to be healthy, to be ready for what you have next. But I'm open-handed of how you want to use me today. And if we can enter that approach personally, then it will flow out into the way that we handle situations. And I think a lot of times we spend most of our time thinking about the thing we're super excited about or the thing that we are dreading is happening, that we don't actually live day in and day out into what God wants to do in each moment and each day and each meeting, each activity. So my encouragement would just be, you have a choice every day of where your trust lies. Your trust can either lie in what you see is going to happen and the fruit that you can in your mind figure out how God might use this, or you can choose to lean on and trust the God who's with you, and he's the one who called you to it. He's the one who has plans for where it's going. So yeah, what would it look like to live with no expectations today and just ask God, hey, what do you want to accomplish?
I felt like God was speaking through you directly at me, because every day I come in with this mindset of I need to get this done. I need to get this done. I need to get this done. I'm on a timeline for X, Y, and Z, whatever. And as you're saying it, like I just feel it start to melt away. Like I literally just felt like I don't have to put all that on me. And then in turn, whoever I'm working with doesn't have to have that put on them. So like that is, wow, that is a great message that I feel like everybody can hear, because we're so driven for productivity. We're so driven for, results or whatever it may be. And instead, let's just sit in the passenger seat a little bit and let God drive wherever he wants to take us.
Absolutely. And I think when you talk about like middle schoolers knowing their identity, right? I think when we know our identity is not based on our achievement, it allows us to not have to expect a result, because we don't serve a God who's result oriented. Like God could do this and make everything right today, but he wants relationship and he wants us to be in the kingdom with him. And so I don't know. I think that's, to your point, I think it's natural for all of us to get into that mindset of, what's this next thing? And the more we can just sit in the fact that like we're a child of God, that he obviously has plans for us and invites us into the work, but he's the one who's already put things into place. I think that freedom allows us to be a better parent, a better friend, a better worker, because we don't have the pressure of figuring out how God's going to use all the things we're being faithful to. We just have to be faithful to it and aware of what's in front of us.
And you keep saying certain things that just like keep springing up thoughts for me. I'm thinking in my own parenthood here. So I have, our oldest is almost 3.5. Our youngest is 7 months old. And I can think back to how many mornings in the past year, 2 years, whatever, did I have the mindset of I need to get this done, but I can't because my kids are X, Y, and Z, or I can't do it because I don't have the time because I have to like watch the kids or be with the kids or whatever. And gosh, like how messed up is that I can't just like, well, I'm not like saying like, whatever. I feel like it's common, but in just that easy change of perspective, like instead of I have to get X, Y, and Z done and my kids are holding me back, like my kids should be first. Just like letting God shape that time that I've been blessed with in their presence, and then just like figure the rest out as it comes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that. Oh, Tim, this is good. This is good, man.
Yeah.
You change my perspective today. You changed my perspective today, and I'm super thankful for just one, the person that you are. I know like we don't know each other that well, but like anytime you preach on Sunday, like my wife and I'm laughing half the time. She's rolling her eyes because I'm laughing, and you just drive the message home, and you just present it in a way that's relatable, and you present it in a way that maybe like piques curiosity to like learn more or to explore more or to dig a little bit deeper in my own heart to try to find out what God's will is. And I think that's just a very special gift that you've been given. And the way that you use that to glorify God is then just like, you know, exponentially spread throughout our community. So thank you for following your calling and having that impact on myself as well as our entire community. So thanks for all of that, and thanks for coming on today.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me.
All right, that's going to do it for today's episode of Faith in Practice. If anything myself or Tim said today resonated with you, feel free to reach out. I will have my contact information in the show notes, and if anybody wants to get connected with Tim, I'm sure, I don't want to speak for you, but I'm guessing you'd be open to that.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Find ways to connect in the show notes or find me on Instagram at Higher Power Sports PT. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for joining us for today's episode of Faith in Practice. We hope you found inspiration and practical wisdom to help you live out your faith on and off of life's playing fields. If today's conversation resonated with you, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review. Your support helps us continue sharing stories and insights that empower you to align your faith with your vocation. For more resources or to connect with us, visit hpsportspt.com. That's hpsportspt.com. Remember, your faith isn't just a part of your week, it's a part of your life. Let your light shine.